I'm Yohannes Haile-Selassie. I'm the director of the Institute of Human Origins here at Arizona State University, and I'm also a professor in the School of Human Evolution and Social Change. I study human origins based on fossil discoveries, and my great passion is understanding human evolution. It is a paper that talks about some early human ancestors from 3.5 to 3.3 million years ago. One of these species is known as Australopithecus afarensis. The second species is called Australopithecus deiremida that we named in 2015. And we had a few more specimens of that species, in addition to a partial foot that we found in 2012, which was not assigned to the species that we named Australopithecus deiremida. So this paper is based on further discoveries which clearly associate the foot that we found in 2012 with Australopithecus deiremida. What that means is that Australopithecus deiremida had a locomotor adaptation very different from Lucy's species, in which case it convinced us that there were at least two different hominid species living at the same time at the site where we found Australopithecus deiremida. But what's even more interesting about this paper is we're also able to show that Australopithecus afarensis and Australopithecus deiremida, they were living next to each other, but they were doing different things. And the diet of Australopithecus afarensis was different from that of Australopithecus deiremida. So basically it tells us that two related species can coexist in the same area at the same time, but somehow the mechanism is always what we try to understand. How did they manage to coexist next to each other? And the current evidence that we're publishing in this paper clearly shows that they were consuming different diet. And one is, the Australopithecus deiremida is more like the earlier species, like Ardipithecus ramidus from 4.4 million years ago, Australopithecus anamensis, which is the probable ancestor of Lucy's species, Australopithecus afarensis. So it informs us about the mechanisms of how these early human ancestors managed to coexist. You look at modern animals today, so many related animals coexist, but we know how they do that. And we think that in the past, our ancestors and other animals that are not present today, which went extinct, were also coexisting at the same time. But we did not have evidence to show how they did it. And this is the first time that we're showing that Australopithecus deiremida and Australopithecus afarensis were able to coexist because, one, they were different in terms of their locomotor adaptation. And two, they were consuming different dietary resources. That's one way to coexist. So there was no competition, right? Because a lot of times we think about coexistence among related species, maybe not possible because of what we call competitive exclusion. They cannot do the same thing, eat the same thing, and coexist because there will be competition, which means one of them will have to go extinct. So here is clear evidence to show that one way to coexist is to actually adapt yourself to different dietary resources. So that's the evidence that we're presenting in this paper. So the Burtele Foot is composed of 8 elements that we recovered from the locality, and those include elements of the second digit, the third, and the fourth digit, and also the big toe. Now that was the most informative because what we saw, opposability, was based on the first ray or the big toe morphology, which clearly shows that there was a lot of movement like the thumb, that it could move that big toe. What that means is when you look at the foot, the Burtele foot, which is what I'm showing you here, that's the big toe, and these are the other digits, the second, the third, and the fourth. So clearly what you see here is this is opposable. It's not lined up with the rest of the digits. Now, what does this mean? Having opposable big toe, like what you're seeing here, allows you to climb up trees because you can grasp branches unlike modern humans, that we can't because our big toe is lined up with the rest of the digits, and we can't really move it like our thumb, okay? So for apes, monkeys, they can move their big toe like a thumb, okay? That's why they're grasping branches when they're up on trees, and we think that this guy, with that opposability, was also a better climber on trees than Lucy's species Australopithecus afarensis. So this is one of the evidence that we have for the ability of the species to which this foot belongs to was a good and able climber, which allows that species to exploit resources from trees, arboreal resources, right? But we also see some of the morphology of these elements, the other digits, that we can see that this animal was able to hyperflex this joint surface, because when you toe off, when you're walking on two legs, this has to be like hyperflexed so that you can toe off. So it's a mix of arboreal adaptation based on the opposability of the big toe, but also bipedality based on the other elements that we're seeing, which makes it really different from what we see in Lucy's species Australopithecus afarensis, which we know from some 3.6 million old footprints preserved at Laetoli in Tanzania, belonging to Australopithecus afarensis, that the footprints clearly show that the big toe was lined up with the rest of the digits. This foot wouldn't have made those prints because it had opposable big toe. So that's one of the convincing reasons as to why whatever species this foot belongs to was different from Australopithecus afarensis, Lucy's species. So now we're assigning this species, this specimen, to Australopithecus deiremida. And Australopithecus deiremida and Australopithecus afarensis at Woranso-Mille, they were living next to each other. The distance between those two that we calculated was about 5 kilometers, which is about 3 miles. So it's like next to each other. Okay. So basically, the only way that they were able to coexist is because, one, they were different in terms of their locomotor adaptation, and two, they were exploiting different dietary resources. That's the best way to coexist instead of competing for the same resources. What we have done is we collected samples from teeth, from Australopithecus afarensis teeth, and also from Australopithecus deiremida teeth. And the isotopes tell us a story about their diet, right? So when we ran the analysis, we found out that Lucy's species Australopithecus afarensis was kind of mixed feeder. It was using all available kinds of dietary resources that are categorized as C3 and C4 plants. On the other hand, for Australopithecus deiremida, what we're seeing is that this species was actually more on the C3 side. That is also the signal that we got from the earlier species, like Australopithecus anamensis, Ardipithecus ramidus. So what that means is that early on, they were more on the C3 side than they are on the C4 side. But environmental change has been opening up all the sites to more open habitats, in which case the number of trees was going down, forests were so patchy, so these animals have to move from place to place looking for resources, and the opening, the expansion of the grassland is actually what triggered the expansion of what we call C4 plants that these hominins had to adapt, because every time there is climate change, every time there is environmental change, these animals have to adapt to that change, right? Otherwise they will go extinct. And this has happened to many, many taxa, not only hominins, but also other animals. So basically, the teeth give us information about what they were eating, and some elements of the bones below the neck tell us about how they were moving. So in this case, we were able to combine both how they were moving and what they were eating in terms of like Australopithecus deiremida, and that information is what now allows us to say that Australopithecus afarensis was different from Australopithecus deiremida. It's really important to understand the past, because that's the lead to our future. If we don't understand our past, we can't really understand fully our present or the future. Basically, what happened in the past, we see it happening today, right? And when you think about what do I have to do with like what happened 3 million years ago, 3.3 million years, 3.5 million years ago, you think about how we're understanding what climate change could do to animals, to the ecosystem, how much it drives species to extinction and others to like speciation, because that's usually how it works. And in a lot of ways, what we see happening today is, particularly in terms of the climate, is what happened also during the Pliocene, about 3.3, 3.5 million years ago. So what was happening then and how it impacted the plants, the animals at that time by studying the fossils left behind, we can actually understand what the consequences of those kinds of climate change is. And today, we're probably in the same situation as the Pliocene. And what we learn from the past could actually help us, mitigate some of the problems that we saw in the fossil record to not happen again. So if you don't understand your past, it's really difficult to understand your future. So that's why here at the Institute of Human Origins, we always say the past is the key to our global future. And that's all the research that we do is in a way that it's relevant to us today and also to our future, to future generations.